Now, I'd like to shift our focus a little bit. I mean, the whole purpose of this event is to really highlight the amazing work that's been happening over the last decade. And then this next part of the event, we're really going to share some stories from state and local leaders about how they've been developing systems to support implementation of intensive intervention, and then share some of that data that really shows the impact of that work. You know, a lot of our initial efforts are developing that system from the beginning, and we move into the work assuming that we're going to have great effects. But as you'll hear in some of the stories, there's sometimes a lot of educator knowledge, beliefs, and practice changes, and that takes some time. And that's really been the value of NCII and being able to work with locals and states leaders to really dig into that implementation and get it started. And we're going to break this next section up into two different sections. And in our first set of videos, you're going to hear from our New York City folks. That's Jason Borges and Megan Duffy. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting them at CEC back in the day when we can actually go to on-site events pre-COVID. And they were sharing some of the work that they had been doing and what were the effects of it, both from a systems level as well as a student level. And they had been working with Devin Kearns, who's been a partner of the center, really critical in helping us get our course content and our modules set up, and really scaling database individualization in the largest district in the country. And then that video will be followed by Leslie Anderson, who has really seen the evolution of the DBI work coming out of NCII. She was with us with our first iteration of the center and was instrumental in field testing a lot of the work that was coming out of our course development, the things that you see on the website, also working with Devin Kearns. And then finally, in this portion, you're going to hear from Tom Jones, who I've had the luxury of working with for the last 5 years. Tom is going to share how they have actually expanded the work with DBI beyond the traditional K-12 setting and moved into preschool, and share a little bit about why they felt it was really necessary to align the intensive intervention supports for those in pre-K into that as they transition into the kindergarten level setting. So this is a good time to just sit back and enjoy, eat some popcorn, and take a little drink, and we'll start that video.
Welcome, my name is Jason Borges. I'm the Director of Academic Intervention Services at the New York City Department of Education, and we are joined with us with Megan Duffy from the Special Education Office, who's the Director of Primary Literacy Interventions. So as many of you or all of you all know, right, we're comprised of 5 boroughs in New York City. We have over 1.1 million students. We have 32 school districts, as you can see here. But what's interesting is that within each borough, we have what's called field support centers. We teamed up with each field support center to identify pilot sites for the DBI implementation. So by the second to third year of DBI implementation, we started off originally just with 2 sites, one in the Bronx and one in Brooklyn. And the idea was we were just really new. This is back in around 2015 with Devin, that we really wanted to get to learn about DBI through not only Devin's lead, through his professional learning supports, but when he went into the schools with us, we were able to learn together and with and from Devin. But you fast forward a couple of years later, around 2018, we ended up having 12 schools across the 5 boroughs that are implementing DBI. So these are what we call the year 2 implementation, because they began implementation in 2017, but by 2018, these were what we called our year 2 schools. And then we began to build what we called sister sites across particularly Queens North and Brooklyn South. As you can see here, we were able to get schools that can kind of sister up with the school within their own field support center, so that we could build kind of an improvement community together. So our professional development model was, yes, an introductory Even for schools that are near 3, each year we have a launch at the beginning of the year led by Devin with any evolving updates around DBI. We have Devin do that. And then we have progress monitoring days. So we have a 2-day training in Acadiance reading that's led by Megan and myself. And it's an overview of progress monitoring measures. We also go over all the essential components or the big ideas of reading or the pillars of reading and really ground them in that first to get everybody kind of on the same page. And we practice with administering each measure and use case studies to be able to think about where would you begin progress monitoring based on the profile of a student. Second was any secondary prevention programs that I noted before. We always provided these kinds of trainings, even as they arose through the process. Also teacher support days, right? So we had the diagnostic assessment, the explicit instruction that I mentioned. We also had 2 days for leadership. So we had the school leaders all come together from all our DBI sites. And that way was able to increase knowledge of DBI on day one so that they can get more in-depth look and a more system level look at DBI. And then and also be able to share with each other successes and challenges. And then day 2 was more closely looking at progress monitoring and its role within DBI. And right now, Megan's going to be going over some case studies from some of our DBI work.
Through our work with DBI, we have had many both student and teacher success stories. Students have been able to make great progress through the thoughtful implementation of individual student plans, as well as the analysis of individual student data. So we're going to take some time now to highlight some of those individual student cases that we have seen throughout our implementation of DBI. And all student names have been changed for these case studies. We'll start with our first student, Vincent. When the DBI team began working with Vincent, Vincent was a 5th grade student who was on a 3rd grade instructional level. Vincent received explicit systematic instruction using an Orton-Gillingham-based intervention program 4 times per week with Miss H, who was the school's IEP teacher. The IEP teachers are very skillfully trained within reading instruction and reading intervention. In addition to this specific program with the IEP teacher, Vincent also received Orton-Gillingham-based reinforcement with fluency practice and repeated readings. And this was done 5 times per week with Miss M, who was Vincent's special education teacher in his ICT classroom setting. And Vincent was progress monitored using a 3rd grade oral reading fluency probe. So before DBI started with Vincent, there were 3 possible goals that were based on Vincent's beginning of the year performance. However, Vincent showed very limited initial growth or almost flat performance that really would not put him on track to reach any of the end of the year goals. So because of this very limited initial growth, it showed a real clear need for DBI. So that's when DBI began for Vincent. So after DBI started, Vincent's performance changed quite dramatically, actually. He was able to then meet his projected goals for the end of the year. And you can see here on one side of our dotted line, which is when DBI began, his initial growth before the process began, and then the accelerated growth and the increased growth that he was able to make after the implementation of the DBI process.
Again, thank you very much for having us share our story in implementing DBI in a very large urban school district.
Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Anderson, and I am the Director of Pupil Personnel Services for the East Providence School District in Rhode Island. I'm just going to share with you now a brief synopsis of exactly where we came from and where we landed. It was important for us to develop a new culture based on what we were learning with the DBI process. How often did we discuss data that served no real purpose in the daily instructional practices that guided our teachers? Way too often. From early on, I was sold on the logic of the DBI model and was convinced this would make a difference for our students with disabilities. No longer were instructional decisions made based on feeling. Because of the superintendent's commitment to continuous improvement, we were able to grow a strong leadership team committed to a system that supported all students. We were able to align our MTSS system based on the original DBI model and support our teachers through high-quality professional development. There was a clear plan for the district and for each school within the district. As a central office administrative team, it was critical for us to support our building principals and teachers. We did that through a series of professional development opportunities for administrators and teachers. We identified funding sources to support our work along the way. Based on the NCII self-assessment tool, the district, along with each school, developed a 5-year plan for implementation of its MTSS system, and that included the DBI model. In fact, the procedures and protocols utilized in the DBI model became the foundation of our entire MTSS system. In the very early stages, we just began to learn the process, to hash through the forms, the procedures, the protocols. The second year, we began implementation with 1 student at each of our Title I schools. By year 3, 5 students were selected in each school until we were ready for full district-wide implementation. In year 5, the schools became independent in their practice, and by year 6, we were ready to include social emotional learning. It was important for us to provide ample support at the building level. Honest conversations about student achievement led us to determine clear and consistent expectations for building administrators, for staff, and we spoke with one voice regarding the need to build student achievement across the district. Because of the work that we began, we saw the culture change and teachers began to support all kids. The idea that all teachers support all kids was definitely a mind shift. But that meant we needed to build capacity of all teachers at the same time. DBI became such an integral part of our work that our conversations and IEP meetings were around real data and progress, the progress that students were making. It's all too easy to talk about what kids can't do. Our conversations were now about what kids could do. Teachers needed more support and training in specific and explicit instruction in reading, math, and behavior. Teachers really needed support in talking about the truths and myths of progress monitoring. Our data analysis meetings became meaningful and gave teachers the opportunity to build their tiers based on solid understanding of data that they had in front of them. Shouts of joy would resound as we moved students to an upper tier at every data meeting. Planning happened for those students whose status had not changed. We built clear references for teachers for their students at every tier, identifying appropriate interventions with the deficit skill and appropriate progress monitoring tools to guide our instruction. These maps were built for math, reading, and behavior. All students had access to the core curriculum supplemented by interventions based on individual needs. It took all the guessing out of the process, and teachers had a clear and defined roadmap for each student. We tracked progress for each student utilizing tools that made sense for the teams. Every teacher participated because of the ease of use of these tools. We built a library of intervention materials that were readily available to teachers. Coaching was provided for teams, new teachers, individual teachers upon request. If a teacher was struggling, they were also provided with an on-site coach to implement the intervention with fidelity. There were many benefits to the implementation of this strong DBI model. All students with intensive needs have access to the core curriculum, as well as intensive interventions. It informed and improved our RTI and MTSS system district-wide. It also informed and improved core curriculum decisions district-wide and gave us a common language and understanding across the district regarding interventions at all tiers. Once implemented, these are the pictures that we began to see. It was not uncommon, and by the end, 76% of all students in the DBI process were making ambitious growth based on national norms. I had a superintendent at the time who used to say to us, "What's special about special education?" Without a doubt, I can answer that question now. We know what's special about special education. We know what needs to guide our thinking and our instructional practices based on the work that we did with the National Center. Throughout the process, teachers became more confident in their database decision making, were committed to fidelity of instruction, and teachers and administrators stated this is the best professional development that has been offered to us ever. And I would be remiss if I did not mention and acknowledge the strong presence and expertise of Dr. Devin Kearns. Many administrators came and went during our tenure together, but much of what we achieved happened because of the support he supported my vision for the district.
So Wyoming is unique in how we provide special education services for 3 to 5-year-olds. Wyoming does not have a state-funded preschool system, so our Part B 619 services are provided through 14 regional child development centers. As part of our continued scale-up of data-based individualization based on stakeholder feedback, as well as input from the Wyoming Advisory Panel for Students with Disabilities, the Wyoming Department of Education established 2 demonstration sites within child development centers in the state. Our plan was to explore the impact of DBI with preschool-age children, analyze the applicability of the framework with the 3 to 5-year-old population group, and assess the benefits of using the framework within a continuum of services. DBI within the identified child developmental centers followed a very similar implementation model, which we'd been using with our target district and other entities in the state. The major difference was in how we introduced the teaming model. In our district or our target districts, we developed and delivered training over the core components of DBI. And once our practitioners had enough data, we would then introduce them to the teaming process as a way to make timely data-based decisions on adaptations to interventions for their students. In the CDCs, we introduced the practitioners to the teaming process at the outset to assist in fostering increased communication and team-based decisions throughout the training process. This change in our implementation model was mainly due to the expressed needs of the CDC staff and because child development centers have a significantly smaller number of staff than do districts. As I previously mentioned, our initial intent was to explore the impact of DBI on preschool-age children and assess its applicability. I am very happy to say we were certainly able to demonstrate its applicability and positive impact with the majority of students who were selected to participate in the project. Through our work, we found that CDC staff communicated better, made better informed and more intentional programming decisions for students, but we also discovered a number of unintended but very positive impacts as a result of the process. One of the CDC demonstration sites had been chosen because they feed our target district. This pairing led to an increased communication and collaboration between both the CDC and the district, which in turn resulted in better CDC program alignment with the district's kindergarten standards. And the cross-agency teaming resulted in better discussion of student need and led to more seamless, purposeful transition services being established to support students as they move from the pre-K environment to the district.
So I want to thank, these videos were put together by our panelists. So I want to thank them for all of their hard work. And I just want to follow up on something Tom said and I know there's a request to talk about it more in the panel, but something else that was really unique in that state is they applied it to Part C, looking at that birth to 2 with providers who were going into the home. So I think there's a lot of innovation, like Rebecca mentioned, is moving us forward in being able to share those evidence-based practices across different educational settings. Now, in the chat box, you'll see that there are a number of questions. And if you have any questions about the work that you just heard or you're about to hear, just make sure you put those questions in the chat box. We're collecting those for our panel. Now, before the panel, we'd like to share 3 more stories. The first video is going to highlight some amazing work that came out of the Georgia Department of Education that was not receiving support from NCII. And in fact, it's an illustration of how they were able to take the model using universal technical assistance resources and develop and pilot a documentation system at the state level so that teams could document DBI for their state or for their student support teams. And then this is going to be followed by Kim St. Martin and Megan Walsh, who are from the Michigan Department of Ed. And I want to give them a special shout out because they are responsible at different levels for the development and refinement of our academic taxonomy of intervention intensity rating rubric. So if you've ever used that, make sure you give them a special shout out. And then finally, we're going to close up with Kim Rice, who's done some amazing work. She works for the Arizona Department of Education and has brought DBI through our targeted assistance and really help local districts, K-12 teachers, to implement DBI across those settings.
But we have seen our MTSS process and implementation move forward more in 2 years than we have seen in 10 years. So we're thankful for that growth and the ability to be able to do that, but we will not have been able to make the progress that we've made had it not been for the support from the Georgia DOE with the Go MTSS SST application.
Georgia's online MTSS SST application is a web-based tool that allows districts and schools to create, monitor, update, and maintain a record of a student's response to interventions. In 2018, the Georgia Department of Education decided to develop a system that would assist with identifying and supporting students receiving interventions and supports in a timely and efficient way. Through the use of technology, Go MTSS SST allows participating districts to document and monitor students' response to interventions, quickly identify students in the SST process, and share information about students' response to interventions within and across districts in Georgia.
It has certainly streamlined our process, and it has allowed us to put all our data in one place, whereas before we had data in multiple places. So for teachers and leaders, that has been a significant benefit for us. It's also easier to access because we can simply just go through our student information system, which each teacher uses on a daily basis, but being able to then navigate into LDS and have the platform readily available for everyone is so much better and easier.
Several divisions within the department work together to make Go MTSS SST a reality. After the initial design and development phases, demo sessions were provided within the department and for districts. These sessions provided opportunities to solicit additional feedback needed to improve the application before making it available statewide. Georgia is currently using this application for students receiving Tier 3 supports and interventions. Go MTSS SST helps users to document the database individualization process for students. As a result, users can enter and select from their list of validated intervention programs within the application, record progress monitoring data for students, evaluate a student's response to a validated intervention program. If students are not responding to an intervention, teams can consult and record additional student data from diagnostic assessments as well as other assessments. And teams can document adaptations. To date, we have 28 districts and LEAs who are using the application. Across these districts, we have 232 sites. This includes primary, elementary, middle, and high schools. There are over 4,000 educators in Georgia who can access this application from their SLDS page. 25 districts and LEAs have signed on to use Go MTSS SST for the 2021-2022 school year.
It was a major eye-opener for me the first time that I pulled up the information about my student, and we looked at her history, we looked at her behavior history, we looked at her academic history, we looked at her testing history, and I saw an entirely new kid. And even though I only have her 1 out of 7 classes, it has made a difference in the way I see her and her behaviors. And it makes me think a little harder about how to approach her if we're having a bad day, if she doesn't feel like doing something, whatever it is. It has definitely changed the way that I work with my student now.
So what's next? In the upcoming school year, participating districts will be able to use this application for students receiving interventions and intensive interventions. To learn more, please visit our website and our demo site. If you have questions about the Georgia Online MTSS SST application, please contact Rondalyn Pinckney. Feel free to visit our website for additional information.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim St. Martin and I'm here today with Megan Walsh. We are celebrating NCII turning 10 years old. Megan and I are going to discuss how in Michigan we're using the taxonomy of intervention intensity to increase educators' use of evidence-based practices within the state of Michigan. One of the ways that we're doing that is we authored a foundational document in collaboration with NCII and other researchers across the country titled Intensifying Literacy Instruction Essential Practices. Megan's going to hone in on one particular essential practice from that document.
Yeah, one of the essential practices identified in that document was selecting intensive intervention platforms to serve as the foundation for intensifying intervention. And what we found was that that practice is essential. Obviously, it's in the practices guide, but we also find it's really difficult to implement. And luckily, NCII advocates a tool that can help with this, the Taxonomy of Intervention Intensity, a tool developed by Fuchs, and Malone in 2017. That tool provides a way for administrators and educators alike to rate interventions intensity along 6 different dimensions, among those strength, dosage, alignment, transfer, comprehensiveness, or explicit instruction principles, and behavioral support. The taxonomy is a really, really valuable tool, but it's not always easy to implement, especially for educators and administrators. And so what we've done is we've kind of tried to take some of the difficult aspects of that away. Kim and I sat down about 1.5 years ago and we practiced using the taxonomy with like real life Michigan interventions, the ones that were being used in schools across our state. And through that process, we kind of realized, okay, we need a toolbox to help make this a little bit more accessible for educators. And so we've spent kind of this last year kind of using NCI's resource library, if you will, to create kind of a curated collection and a toolbox to support our educators in using the taxonomy. This toolbox includes kind of a diagnostic data collection guide to help our educators determine what diagnostic data they need to collect for their students, and kind of links them to the different diagnostic measures, some of which have come from NCII's library. And then they use that diagnostic data then to complete a strengths and needs inventory on their individual students. And then that in turn can help them decide which intervention aligns best to their students' strengths and needs. We've created a curated intervention collection, and we gathered research articles for them. We know that many educators don't have access to university databases. A lot of them may not know how to extract an effect size or calculate an effect size on their own, or what the difference is between an empirical study and correlational research, for example. And so we've kind of taken some of that legwork out of this process for them by creating kind of these summaries and snapshots of the studies, again, using that NCII tools chart and some other resources. And then we've also kind of adapted NCII's taxonomy rubric for to kind of be used. in the intervention selection process. And all of this, we hope, as we kind of made this taxonomy, we hope more accessible to some of our educators. We're hoping that then they'll be able to use the taxonomy and use the information we've provided them to create really individualized intensive intervention plans. And then as they use data and collect data on their students, to adapt those plans to better meet the needs of their students through data-based individualization. And our hope is that as we remove barriers and we work with educators to give them the professional training they need, our hope is that we are going to meet the needs of more and more students in our state, because we know students with disabilities, students in need of acceleration, like they need this support. And so we're really hopeful that through creating these tools and as we launch a model demonstration project in the fall, that we're gonna see the scaling up of evidence-based practices around intensive intervention here in Michigan.
Thank you, Megan. So next year's a really exciting year for us within the state of Michigan. Megan and I have our contact information here for you. You also have our website information. And please subscribe to the MyMTSS Technical Assistance Center YouTube channel. The professional learning that Megan was just referring to, those types of modules are going to be uploaded and available for educators across the country. So lots of exciting things, and we're really thankful to be here. Happy birthday, NCII. We really appreciate your support. Thanks, everyone.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Rice. I am a recruitment and retention specialist in exceptional student services at the Arizona Department of Education. I'm thrilled to speak about the process to develop the Arizona Data-Based Individualization, or DBI, Professional Learning Series. We first learned about the work of the National Center on Intensive Intervention, or NCII, on DBI at a 2019 Council for Exceptional Children conference presentation led by Dr. Tessie Bailey, and then further at a presentation at the Collaboration for Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform, or CEDAR Center, convening later that year. We were interested in exploring DBI as a new professional learning series for Arizona districts and charters, so we used implementation science to consider our capacity, need, fit, readiness, resources, and evidence. Our consideration included visiting Wyoming to see the DBI professional learning sessions in action. We observed the teaming and coaching portions of DBI delivered by Dr. Bailey to Wyoming educators participating with the Wyoming Department of Education for their state systemic improvement plan and their state personnel development grant. Upon return, we worked with NCII as a state receiving targeted assistance. As development began, schools were responding to COVID, and after careful consideration, we decided to move forward with the DBI professional learning series, knowing that we need to be flexible to adapt to the ever-changing needs of the schools. We began developing a readiness webinar over the summer with nearly 100 districts and charters who were interested and attended. There was an application process, and 3 schools were chosen to participate in this professional learning series. We worked with elementary, middle, and high school teams as one cohort. Under usual circumstances, the DBI Professional Learning Series is 2.5 days of face-to-face professional learning spread out over 3 months with coaching sessions in between. We adjusted the presentation to reflect the virtual environment based on the needs of the schools. Rather than 2.5 days, we spread it out to weekly and bi-weekly sessions with multiple asynchronous and synchronous sessions and coaching sessions over 3 months, and adjusted based on the ever-changing needs of the schools. As time went on, we decided to keep the elementary and middle school teams together and provide support to the high school separately because of their very different needs. Each of the school teams had issues with student attendance based on COVID, moving from virtual to face-to-face for individual students, and then changing teachers because of the shift in learning environments. In reflecting on what was most valuable and what school leadership teams need, we focused on extending the time. We were originally scheduled through the end of February, but 2 of the schools worked through the end of April to maximize their own professional learning. We also shifted the focus to case studies. I think the greatest outcomes reported from the schools is that they added to the dialogue regarding multi-tiered systems of support at their school sites, specifically sharing their knowledge and resources about Tier 2 and Tier 3 for students with severe and persistent academic and behavioral needs that they learned as a result of our discussions within the series. At the Arizona Department of Education, we are creating a webpage on our website showcasing resources devoted to supporting the data literacy of teachers. Another outcome is the connection with the new Progress Center. One district already had the relationship established with Dr. Donna Sacco, who works with NCII in Progress, and other work is continuing from DBI to Progress, and the relationships between school and technical assistance provider are stronger than ever. A third benefit has been the tie-in with some of our other work through the American Institutes of Research and the CEDAR Center, which we've been involved with over the last 6 years. One of our CEDAR goals was on data literacy for pre-service and in-service teachers. We were fortunate that Northern Arizona University led this effort, which culminated in the development of the Teaching and Assessing Data Literacy Guide for pre-service and in-service teachers. DBI is featured within the guide because of our CEDAR collaboration. Additionally, NIU, in collaboration with the American Institutes of Research, has provided 2 national webinars, and the work has been featured on both the NCII and the CEDAR Center websites, as well as shared locally. Further, Dr. Sacco, our technical assistance provider from NCII, Lindsay Hayes, another technical assistance provider from the American Institutes of Research, and I presented about DBI to Northern Arizona University faculty, students, and educators. So this has truly been a great collaboration between National Technical Assistance Centers, the Arizona Department of Education, local school districts and charters, and faculty and staff from colleges and universities. We have truly enjoyed this partnership and look forward to continuing collaborative efforts in the future and scaling up in our schools with continued technical assistance from NCII and AIR. Further, we are looking at alignment with our other initiatives and how we are selecting and supporting schools, including cross-agency communication and planning to look at selection for participation and ongoing support. Thank you.